I'll tell you this. What's up, Ryan?
Hey, it's good to be back. Thank you so much, Jeff. It's always great to be able to see you and connect and talk about Star Wars.
Absolutely, dude. So just before, what I was saying is, I think your microphone might be a little close to your speaker, because last time I didn't notice it till the end. There was a bit of an echo happening, just a little bit. We'll see it happen.
Okay.
If it happens this time. No big deal.
Okay. Well, I will be careful.
It's all good. But yes, dude, it's good to see you too. And it's so funny for all those watching. Ryan and I were literally having a conversation, or a periodic one-on-one where we get together anyway for work stuff a couple of hours ago. So we jump on, we're like, oh, hey, it's like we just saw each other. Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like to rob a line from Star Wars. Didn't we leave this party? This is it's funny because it's like we ended our day. I think that was for you and I both. That was our last meeting of the day, and then coming into this, now we're starting the evening, and it's with the Kessel chat. So it's a great way. It's a perfect way to end the day, start the day.
Exactly. And we already have our first guest here, Rich. We got a couple folks watching. Rich, thank you for being here, man. Thanks for jumping on the chat. It's good.
Hey, welcome.
Awesome. So tonight on the show, posted a little bit earlier. This is Ryan's topic. Actually, Ryan, you go with it, because this is. Oh, am I muted, or is it just quiet? Oh. Okay.
Oh no.
Mike. Rich said my mic was a little quiet, so I will just move it right here into my face, so I'm chewing on it. No, I'll just do this. How's this? Rich, let me know if that's okay.
Good deal.
But it was Ryan. Tonight's topic was totally yours. Why don't you go for it?
So I thought this would be fun for us to talk about. Like in the last couple of episodes, episode 9, 8, and 7, we have been talking a lot about like the movies. We've been talking a lot about the television shows, and I thought, why not spend an entire episode talking about the Star Wars that we like isn't that isn't inside of the movies and isn't necessarily inside a television show. And one of the things that I think you and I both really like a lot is the video games, and how that's been such a big part of our own like Star Wars fandom. And I really liked how, like, I mean, I will say, like, these topics just like pour right out. Like, we were on this was us talking earlier, and we were already like knee deep in this conversation because there's so much like great Star Wars video games. There's great like Star Wars books, and I don't mean just like the comic books or the other books, but we started getting into things like, in addition to the Star Wars games, Star Wars video games, we talked about things like I'm a huge fan of the visual dictionaries, so we wanted to talk all about Star Wars out. Oh yeah, see,
Yes.
so yeah, like we're both big fans of the side quests of Star Wars. So I got to ask you, Jeff, because we were talking about this in our call earlier today about, and we were also doing work, if anybody's watching. But we were talking about kind of some of our first Star Wars video games, our favorite Star Wars video games, and you had one that was your favorite. Why don't you start there?
Oh man, so I think I had mentioned two of them, but I'll pick just the one. I'll just do the one, and it's the classic Knights of the Old Republic, KOTOR. That game was my jam. I think it was the first time I played a game where I realized, and I played it on PC at the time. It was the first game I realized that the type of game I like to play. So I used to go to LAN parties and stuff all the time. My friends and I would host LAN parties, and that's a longer story too about how that even came to be. But like lots of like back when, for anybody who was like played LAN parties or like first person shooters back in the day, like there was Half-Life, and then there was all these mods for Half-Life that you could there were special ones you could download and install, and one of them was called Counter-Strike. It was not a standalone game. It was a mod you installed into Half-Life as its own thing with like just a handful of maps that you played for LAN parties or whatever. It became its own game later on. But we would do things like that, and those were fun events, but I never really enjoyed, like I wasn't going to go home and play those games. Like they weren't my thing. When I found KOTOR and started playing it, I loved not only the pace. It's not super fast. You're not required to do things on really quickly to progress the story along. But more importantly, for anyone's played it, I loved the choose your own adventure aspect of it. Like, so every character, every NPC you'd interact with that had some way of advancing the story for you had like 2 or 3 options and responses you could give to that person. And it wasn't just 2 or 3 options and look, there's your interaction and move on. Those 2 or 3 interactions actually shaped your relationship with that NPC, which shaped how you got quests. It shaped how the game played. And I think there were actually, the ending of the game was the ending of the game. But throughout it, the path you took would be shaped by your responses and your interactions with these people, and would either almost like reputation gain or loss would change which groups might be good or bad from your perspective and how they're going to treat you, whether you can buy stuff from them, what have you, based on how you actually respond. If you're a complete, asshat every time you respond back to them, and whatever the worst possible option was, they're going to treat you like that the entire game. It'll be hard to do things, you get in more trouble, etc. I love that because it put you into the story. You weren't just playing a story that was pre-created for you and getting to enjoy that, and that is a lot of fun. Think like Star Wars Battlefront games. What was the Star Wars Battlefront that came out a couple years ago? Was it Inferno Squadron? There was the 3 or 4, those, whatever. And that's where we got to learn about Operation Cinder and all this. Like, you didn't choose your own adventure, but you definitely got to play a part in this other alternate storyline that we didn't know anything about beforehand. KOTOR for me was so awesome because it was beyond that. You got to actually shape the story as you went along. There might have been a linear thing that was going to happen at the beginning and the end, but the nuance in the middle, you got to control. And for me, that set the stage for wanting to play like MMORPGs and other role-playing style games, much more so than like a first-person style game, first-person shooter or what have you, because of the pace and because of that story element.
Yeah, I really feel like the Star Wars video games, like there's so many entry points for people. And I was in fact I really liked KOTOR. Like that was one of those things where I was like, oh, I'm on board with this. If I wish we have a colleague of ours at Cisco, and her name is Tammy Pressman, and Tammy was like an amazing MMO role playing game player, led like these amazing groups online. If Tammy, if you're out there, like you taught me everything that I needed to know about that. But one of the things that is really great is that there were also like a lot of really fun games. And when I mean fun, I mean painfully hard games when we were kids. And so I was sharing this with Jeff earlier. I have a hard time letting things go. I have my original Nintendo games right here, which I'm more than happy to flash up my original copy of Legend of Zelda. But one of the games that I bought back from home video in Manteca, California,
Oh my God,
for I think maybe $5 is Super Return of the Jedi, which is for the Super Nintendo. One of the hardest games I've ever played. To this day, it's still hard to get past the speeder segment at the start of the game. Try to get through that with all of your lives intact. But I loved like all of the little crazy hard Star Wars games that were like available on Nintendo or Super Nintendo. Like there was the original Star Wars games, and they had Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. And those all came out for NES, and they were crazy hard. They were impossible to beat. The NES Star Wars was one of like the craziest. I honestly don't remember the part in Star Wars where Luke ends up in anti-gravity in a part of the Death Star that's covered in spikes, but apparently that happens because it's inside of the game. It just takes off. It isn't so hard to beat. And so, you know, you played that game, and then the Super Nintendo came out, and there were suddenly all of these other games, which of course were all Super Star Wars and Super Empire Strikes Back.
They loved
and,
the
my
super
favorite was
the super
Super
pronoun.
Return of
They
the
freaking
Jedi.
loved that. It was too
I
funny.
loved Super Empire Strikes Back too, and you got to play all of these different characters. You could be Luke with his lightsaber and this crazy spin attack that was like a Metroid like attack, or it was you know, you could be Chewbacca, you could be Princess Leia in her bounty hunter getup. And all of that was just so cool. And those were some of my favorite games when I was a kid. And I'm going to ask Jeff if you might remember this one. There was a game that I spent hours and hours and hours on my computer. You know, my Packard Bell 486. It was the X-Wing video game series. And there was the X-Wing series, and then they had a companion where you could have an extension, and it was TIE Fighter.
Yes.
And I wonder if you ever got a chance to play that too. It came in like 5 floppy disks, and they weren't the floppy ones, they were the 2-inch ones, and I'm dating myself here,
3.25,
but they were
3.5.
that was like one of my favorite games.
3.5. Yeah, there were 3.5.
3.5. Thank you.
5.25 and 3.5. Come on, dude. No.
I know,
yes,
right?
I totally remember the game. Not only do I remember the game, it came on the heels of me just completely like being a total suck at Wing Commander, which I had for was it a Packard Bell? It may even have been a Packard Bell Pentium 166 with MMX.
Oh, wow. Hey, you were rolling hard.
I had MMX, whatever the hell that actually meant. I still have no idea, but they sold it as an amazing thing at the time. My Pentium 166 with MMX, and I played Wing Commander, and I was just horrible at flight games. I even got this beautiful Logitech joystick. The damn thing was monstrous. And I was like, it's got a handle, and it was a grippy thing, and I'm like, this will clearly make me better. It did not. And then I got the X-wing game, and I was so excited to play this Star Wars X-wing game. And if I thought I was going to be somewhat better at that, I was also incorrect. It was so bad that I played it like 3 times, and then I think I threw it into my closet and I didn't touch it again because I was like, this is terrible. Because I was so it was just that the controls, I was not comfortable with like the x-axis, x and y, z-axis stuff, and it just, I couldn't get my head around it. And oh my god, dude, it melted my brain and ruined my like
Oh,
15-year-old patience, and that was the end of it.
it's a crazy hard game. I was terrible at it. I spent all of my time. By the way, I see Rich just called out Amiga. Thank you very much. This is a good call out. There was so much work that went into, like, if you wanted to get all the medals for the campaigns in the X-Wing series, and so I would just like pour so much time into trying to do this. I'm surprised I like made it out of school, because it was, I don't need to read Great Expectations. I need to beat X-Wing.
I mean,
and
I think that's an objectively true statement in general.
Honestly,
so.
no one needs to read Great Expectations. It's terrible. It's a symbol tome that means nothing. I'm playing X-Wing like all the time and just getting nowhere fast. And to this day, I still think about how, man, those A-Wings have no shielding. When I was at Galaxy's Edge, that was my first, they had an A-Wing there, and I was like, oh, the A-Wing. Oof. That is not the one you want to fly. You are gonna, those concussive missiles don't do anything. So I loved that X-Wing game. Of course, I kind of moved on. I played the KOTOR, but there was a couple other games that I love, and I'm gonna just kind of put this out there and hope that someone else can remember this. But when I was a kid, there was an arcade that was in a town that was not far from where we lived. And so I used to go to that arcade, and they had all these really cool games. They had a Star Trek The Next Generation pinball game, which is a dream of mine to own one day. And they also had this amazing, I think it was like running on some type of like Sega engine, but it was the Star Wars trilogy arcade setup. And you could play any one of the movies, and it was like the most like true to life thing that I had ever seen. It was so cool. You could play the Battle of Hoth, and of course now when you play the Battle of Hoth and anything like, even the GameCube had games that looked amazing when you play the Battle of Hoth, and you're, the little speeder, snow speeder, and you're, using your tow cable, and you're trying to make sure Dak makes it out alive. But the game was one of the best graphics. It was one of the best. I drained quarters and quarters and quarters into that machine, and if anybody out there had a chance to play that game, it is by far one of my favorite Star Wars video games experiences. And I'm sure you can find the box online. They never were able to port it successfully into like a video game system. And so you can only find it in arcades.
So even like they could even make an emulator out of it.
No.
Okay.
And I almost think it's because it was such a big, like, graphics heavy game. Like at a time,
There we go.
And I'm sorry, I think I'm about to cut out there. But if you would go to things, and some of the games would be more polygons, so like you would see like someone's arm and it would be like a cube. And this game was smooth. It had very like no rough edges. And you even had like a lightsaber battle against Darth Vader. You had a lightsaber battle against Boba Fett.
Holy crap.
it is still like you can find YouTube clips of it. It was one of my favorite games. It's right up there with a lot of these early games that were on the NES and Super NES.
That's awesome, dude. Actually, so two things you made me think of that had nothing to do with Star Wars, but you triggered emotional responses for me. As soon as you said, I think it was based on the Sega engine. I don't know if anybody else watching the show right now thought this too, but in my head, I just wanted to yell out Sega. Like just it ran through my head instantly. And then when you were describing like sort of the portability of one of the games, do you remember Neo Geo?
Oh yeah,
or what?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if it was successful anywhere else, but at least in SoCal where I grew up, like I saw the game systems everywhere, but I never could find anyone who actually had one of the Neo Geo cards that would let you like save your game and move it to another game arcade or whatever. Like I saw it, I'm like, oh, that seems really awesome. People are like, oh, okay, yeah, we should totally do that.
Oh,
I don't know. Did anyone ever actually use it for that purpose?
I'm telling you, we could easily have a couple of spin-offs of the Kessel chat. And this could be a whole video game discussion. One, I'm a huge fan of all old time video games. I have a Raspberry Pi huge emulator setup that I've built. I love old classic video games. It's how I've brought my kids into video games. But when you're talking about things like 3DO, I always think about like when I was a kid. And by the way, I'm going to cover something that I think the angry video game nerd covers this almost to a perfectly, which is the old console wars back in the 80s and the 90s, when it was like, oh, you only are on 8 bits. Oh, you got to get to 16 bits. And oh, you got a 16-bit system. You got a 32-bit system. And I remember if you like 3DO and the Atari Jaguar, it was like these were the things that like, oh, you're a real, like that's an adult game system. Like that's the real gaming system. And it's funny because I never knew someone that had it. A friend of mine had an Atari Lynx, which was a one of the first color video game, like handheld video game systems, and it came with like I think one game, which was like Batman Returns. And there was it was like a great technology, but after like the heyday of Atari, they could never like get it back. And those, I remember those systems were like $700 or like $600. And I mean I was like, saving all of my money to buy $100 or $200 Super Nintendo. Like there was no way that I was going to have to take out a small loan at the bank to get.
You're getting a HELOC just to get a game system.
Like it's funny because that's why I wonder now, because there used to be a wonderful history of arcades. And that's really what I mean by like, you would go and you would find like a Star Wars pinball or an amazing, like, I've even seen like crazy games at arcades. Like there's an amazing arcade in Santa Cruz that's on the boardwalk, and they have some insane old weird classic video games there, crazy arcades. There's a Star Trek Voyager game system, which I thought, what is that? Do you sit there for 7 years and hope that you get home? Atari 2600, I am right there with you. I still have mine. I see that comment, Rich. The thing that I think is funny is I like my kids now, all their gaming is happening on their phone. My daughter just downloaded the new Oregon Trail and said, oh, look, there's Oregon Trail on my phone. It's this new game. I was like, it is the oldest game since games came.
You're like to your daughter, just don't get dysentery. You're gonna get it.
Exactly. I was like, you really want to be careful when you're fording the river. But yeah, it's like, I wonder if kids are going to have that same experience now, or if this like mobile gaming, because I haven't seen a lot of the mobile gaming for Star Wars. I know that it's out there. Like I know that there's a lot of I know that there are a lot of games out there, but I haven't played them, and I wonder how much that experience will carry over in this new generation.
Okay, so since we're talking about that, it's okay. A friend of mine got me turned on. I played it a while ago, but I think it's Galaxy of Heroes. Galaxy of Heroes. I I've been playing it for a little bit. I'll be honest with you, the simplicity of this style of game on your mobile device, because of what it has to be. The graphics are amazing, and it's interesting to be a part of. There's a lot of things going on in the game that make me think that they're trying to make it a much more interactive, like classic Final Fantasy style or turn-based role-playing game, Final Fantasy or Neverwinter Nights or one of those games where it's completely turn-based for every interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I've missed something so far, or I'm not far enough along in the game, every interaction is just going from hop to hop to hop to having these turn-based fights with Imperials. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can build up a new little group of people with Anakin and all these other players, which is super cool. It's fun to do, but it is highly repetitive. Like every interaction, it probably gets harder and harder, but every interaction feels so completely repetitive that I hope there's some more to it in the game later on. But this one specifically, I'm like, I might do it again because it's kind of like busy work. It just kind of keeps you like, I don't want to think for a while. I'll just do this. I will say they do actually have KOTOR for iPhone. It's on the App Store. I played it. Not awesome. Not awesome. It's not that they don't try, but imagine playing KOTOR on your mobile phone. Like you have to use your finger as the mouse to pick where you're going to walk and move around. And so it's not that you can't do it. You just have to be really okay with the interface and the experience being much slower because you can't move as quickly as you could on your keyboard and mouse or whatever. So it just is kind of a different gameplay at that point. It's not bad. It's different in a way that it made me feel like, okay, it's taking me so long to do something that my energy level starts to dissipate by the time I actually get to the thing. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I really want to play this anymore because I can't get to the next action quick enough to make me feel like I'm continuing the game. It feels like my game's just kind of dragging. I'll go back and try it again, but it was a little, I don't know. The port just really wasn't what I was expecting for a mobile device. On my iPad, my big iPad Pro that I bought, the first generation one a few years back, it was a little different because you had more to work with. But on my actual iPhone, the last time I tried it, it was a little, I don't know, it was just a little off.
Yeah. And I find that there's just this really small amount of delay that happens when you're trying to move. You're trying to move your finger and it's trying to sense where you're wanting to go. I have to say, like, this is where I feel like this is where the generational break is, I guess, because I can't give up the classic gaming. Like I'm still upset that my light gun doesn't work on this TV back here. I really love classic gaming. I have all of my kind of favorite controllers. Even I worry about when those controllers will break because they're such a big part of how I enjoy playing the game.
Yeah.
For the Raspberry Pi emulator that I built, the thing that I did was I bought USB versions of like the Nintendo controllers and even a Super Nintendo controller. I don't know, maybe it's just that it doesn't have, more than 25 years of wear on it, but it just is missing that it just wasn't like the real thing. And so I was already looking into, because I do not want to, because I still have my old game systems and I don't want to modify my original controllers because I know that you can make that into a USB. But yeah, I'm so worried about when my NES Max controller is going to go out. And again, this is I want to disagree with Rich. This is me talking about what old people still like. So I mean I'm sure there's people out there that collect things like vinyl records. This is my vinyl records. This is my the thing that I really enjoy, and it's so great because there are so many awesome Star Wars things there. Did you get a chance to play? This is generational. Did you get a chance to play Shadows of the Empire on Nintendo 64?
No. But okay. To be fair though. When I was growing up, my parents, I never owned a game system. The first game system I ever owned was one I bought. It was a Nintendo 64. I only I had the game that came out was 1080p. I think it was the snowboarding game that came with it,
Oh
which
yeah, yeah.
I wasn't my thing, so I got bored with it, and I couldn't afford at the time to buy another game. It was like 6 months later that I finally bought GoldenEye, and then I just played the hell out of GoldenEye. Like that's the only thing I would
Yeah.
play. But I never could afford another game, and I didn't know what else to actually look for, so I ended up not having that very long. But like
Hmm.
most of my life, like the closest thing I had was my neighbor across the street had a Super Nintendo, and so we would play his, or classic Nintendo and then Super Nintendo. Or my cousins had a ColecoVision, so a ton of Burger Time and stuff like that. But I didn't have a lot of those systems growing up, so it wasn't until later on in life to go to an arcade and actually get to play these things in an arcade, or actually as an adult get to play systems like the Nintendo Switch and whatever else. So I didn't get a lot. I didn't get a lot of exposure to that when I was a kid. I'm aware of them because I've looked into them and like I understand what they are, but I just didn't get to play them a lot. Now, I didn't get to play a lot until I could actually buy my first computer. Then I could like go to a Aware site or wherever and pull down a game for free, and then I could play whatever the hell
Oh
I
yeah.
wanted. But I still couldn't afford to buy a ton. To go to Fry's and kind of just walk around going, oh, and that was about it.
No, it's the truth though, and like I know this is gonna sound funny, but I almost kind of like I harken back to very simple games, like I did not have a plethora of video game systems. We had we had of course the Atari,
Mhm.
we had 2600, we had the NES. I sold half of my NES games to help buy a Super Nintendo, which to this day I'm upset that I did that. I'm still upset that I sold Mega Man 2. I feel like I've betrayed it. It was one of my favorite games. How did I sell that? So I do have a lot of those old games, but then once the game systems like N64, I got an N64, but then I just kind of like I almost got left behind in some of these games. And so I find myself really enjoying, like in the Star Wars games are a really good example. I find myself really enjoying some of the simpler Star Wars games. And I mean, we have like Breath of the Wild, for example, and that's like, it is a breathtaking game. It is artwork to play. It is unbelievable.
It is objectively amazing. Yeah.
But I will say though that some of my favorite Legend of Zelda games are still things like A Link to the Past. It's my all-time favorite game. I love Wind Waker. I love the exploration elements, but I love what Star Wars did with the Lego Star Wars series. And I know that those are very simple games, but I thoroughly enjoy them. Well, and
Matt, actually, he's with you. Matt Saunders said a little bit earlier, the entire Star Wars Lego series owns. They are amazing. Like the Lego Star Wars are amazing. The Lego Lord of the Rings games are amazing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're all done so well. Like enough campiness in the game to match that like Lego like humor they do in their content anyway, and then you add that to a game and it just makes it super cool.
No, and I mean, I'm like a video game completist. Like I love all of the little side quests that are inside of the Lego games. Like, so I had the Star Wars Saga game on GameCube, and or I'm sorry, it was on Wii. You could get the individual games on GameCube, and then I ended up getting the Saga on Wii, and that was like one of my favorite things. I loved getting all of the individual mini kits and all of the playing out all of the levels, finding all of the hidden things. That always reminded me of Legend of Zelda. What was it? Getting a true Jedi status of getting all of those gold coins and having to go boom, and I loved that series. There is actually a new version of it that's coming out, and you might know this, Jeff, because I don't. I know that it was delayed. It was supposed to come out in May, and then they announced that it was being delayed. And I was actually looking forward to getting it for the Switch because I thought, oh, it's like a really cool thing for, especially with like COVID and like my kids are inside the house. And it was supposed to be out like this month, but it's been delayed. And I don't know when it's coming out now, but it is a new collection of the Star Wars Lego video games. And it's all coming out for Switch. And it just looks awesome. There is a little trailer for it online, and when my kids saw it, they were like, "Oh, we got to get this game." So, and I'm really excited about it too.
I feel like I know what you're talking about. I was just pulling it up to see if I could figure it out again. There is Star Wars Hunters.
Yes.
That's coming out this year. That looks really amazing.
Mhm.
That's for the Switch.
Yes, yes.
Let's see here.
And there's this Lego Star Wars game that's also coming out, and it looks great. It's a Skywalker saga game, so they're gonna have the elements of like it's gonna have the episodes 1 through 3, 4
Mhm.
through 6, and then of course 7 through 9. And I think that they're gonna sneak in a port of the levels from the. I think this was only available on the 3DS or the DS, whatever Nintendo ultimately calls it now. And I think it's over now. Is they had a Clone Wars, a small little Clone Wars game,
Ooh.
Clone Wars Lego game, and that was great. The levels were like super hard, but yeah, the entire series is like one of my favorites. And so yeah, really looking forward to that. But at the end of the day, it's still stuff like this that I like. I'll go back
Mhm.
to where as and they are impossible to beat. If there's someone out there that has beat Return of the Jedi easily, like I have the Game Genie, and that's how I will freely admit I have to Game Genie my way through the original Star Wars, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. But if anybody has beaten the Super Return of the Jedi, which I to this day have not, more power to you, because man, these games, they were built to just almost pull your hair out. So yeah.
Yeah. Matt, which game was that you said was awesome, but partner play is partner play
Oh,
is awesome. Which game was that?
I know exactly what he's talking about. The partner play on the Lego Star Wars game.
Oh, okay. Okay.
One of the things that I remember when the Skywalker saga came out, my oldest daughter. Wow, like this is a whole like generational chat, Jeff. This is what the Kessel chat can still do. Um, uh, so my oldest daughter, I want to say she might have been like 5, and she was really excited about playing the game. And when you in the Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker saga game, you can I'm sorry, the saga game, you can free up a level where it's almost like a build area where you're like it's great for kids to kind of learn how the game works.
like
And
like
so
the beginner
my
zone.
daughter and I.
The beginning
Oh, I'm
zone.
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say like the beginner zone of like any MMO where there's the beginning zone where you have to like just get yourself ready and like get familiar with the controls and all that.
Oh, exactly. And so we used to play that a lot, because I had, at that point I'd already opened up all those levels, and it was a way to kind of introduce Gabby to the game. And so we would do like this cooperative play here. I see Rich's note there.
Dude, Rich, get some
thank
sleep,
you so
man.
much.
I mean, thank you for sticking with us too, but get some sleep. We'll talk to you soon, buddy. Have a good night.
Good night. But there was also a really cool part of that game, which is it was Rogue One before Rogue One was a thing. So the very first level in that Lego game was you kind of running through the game, and you were on the what is it, Tentative 4, Tentative 5. You're racing to basically get the Death Star plans like through the ship, and you ultimately lead to that scene right here. And you're getting chased by Imperials, and it's almost like you almost start at the moment before Star Wars starts. And yeah, it's if I'm right, that's like a secret level after episode 3. It's Star Wars before, it's Rogue One before Rogue One
That's
was a
wild.
thing. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, and you've got me thinking that I need to go back and like find some of these games. Actually, I was just looking up, but I will get distracted now. Looking up some of the Lego Star Wars stuff for the Switch. My son is hooked on Breath of the Wild. Like my wife had him super into Animal Crossing, New Horizons Animal Crossing, and it was great until he thought, well, maybe I can try your game, Dad. I'm like, no, I don't think you're gonna be able to play the game mechanics. He's 5.5. Like, the game mechanics might be a little off. Nope, he is obsessed. Like, we have arguments all the time about like him stopping, and like it's. I'm like, I need to find something else to get him into, because he's a little like obsessy pants about playing Breath of the Wild on a regular basis. I'm like maybe we need a Star Wars Lego game that's partner play, so we can do it together, and then I can give a timer and say, okay, now we're done playing, because right now it's really hard to get him off of Breath of the Wild. I
Oh,
get it, because for the first 6 months or so that I had the game, like, it was really hard to get me to stop playing at any point, because you just get so completely sucked into it. But I'm like, okay, my 5-year-old dude, it's probably time to take a break from a game for a little bit.
I will confess something. Your son and I, we are alike in this way, because it is like, I can't, once I get into a game, it is hard to pull out. It is hard to stop playing these games,
Yeah.
because especially Breath of the Wild, which is so immersive. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to stop playing this game. Otherwise, I will be convincing myself to be going to work. And my kids like really like food, and so I need to keep my job so that way they can eat. And these games today are so great. Like, they really are that like amazing immersive experience. Breath of the Wild, like all of the Legend of Zelda games. And in fact, I would hope that Star Wars is kind of looking at that and kind of seeing a certain amount of opportunities. And I know some of these very recent games that have come out are starting to kind of move in that direction, where they are kind of an open universe. Fallen Order, thank you so much. I have not played Fallen Order. I see Matt bringing this up. I have watched clips of Fallen Order, like some of the cinematic sequences that are in there, the cutscenes, and it is so good. I was this is like with a lot of the shows, I'm always having to choose between my desire to sit down and then become totally like binging out on this, like, oh, I've got to play this all the way through, or I've got to watch that series all the way through, versus like, oof, I got to go to work today.
I know. I'm super
Yeah.
bummed about Fallen Order, because as of at least the last time I looked, it's not on the Switch, and the Switch is just the only thing I have right now. And my even Macs just don't play games like that really well, even if it's available on the Mac. But I've watched because I like at the time I'm like, well, I can't buy it on the Switch. I guess I'll have to find some other way to consume it. And so I went and found a few different YouTube streams where all they did was basically stitch together all of the cinematic cutscenes from all of Jedi Fallen Order. It's like an hour and a half to 2 hours long. But I sat back and like just one Saturday, we were doing some stuff. My son just kept taking breaks and watching that. And just watching the cinematics and the story that it progresses, I love. I'm like, oh, I want to play this game so bad, but
It's a great game.
Bring it to the Switch, and then I'll play it all day long.
Oh no, totally. I mean, again, my PTO is calling me to play. It's funny, because it's like that's where it's like, double down there, like invest in that story, because Legend of Zelda figured out how to do that. That's really where these stories do their best work, is when you've got these really great characters, you make the world really big, and it's something that you can explore and live in and make choices that then affect the nature of the game.
So something about that game from the cutscenes I watched, or from watching the cinematics, but not having played it, it got me thinking that game specifically does something you and I have talked about a couple different times, which is we get to see through lines in Star Wars in the game. In that case, what's his name? Darth Vader is in it. He's not in it a lot, but he is part of the game. And you get to see his Inquisitors. And so we've seen the Inquisitors in Star Wars Rebels. We've read about the Inquisitorius in publications. Jedi Fallen Order is only the second place you have to actually get to really see an Inquisitor kind of be part of this new canon that Disney's put out there. And so I love that. And I love that the through line is Darth Vader. He keeps showing up. But what I like about the story, Matt, to your point, that it's maybe a little short relative to other types of games. That's a really good point. The thing that I actually like about that concept is we know these stories, or we can infer these stories of Darth Vader seeking out Jedi and trying to wipe all of them out, all the ones that are still out there someplace. But we never get to see it. There's been books in the past where they touch on it here and there, but you never really know how many Jedi or Padawans actually survived. We don't know. They're going through it, trying to find them. It could be 10,000. We really have no idea. And so I like this idea of getting to see sort of a point in time story. It has enough richness. We get to see another through line in Saw Gerrera, because he's showing up everywhere. In the new Bad Batch series, we see Saw Gerrera like in the like in the first or second episode, he just pops in right away. And I like that because when the story ends in Fallen Order, we've now brought in a Dathomir Night Sister as part of part of the character base. So she's part of it. Has nothing to do with the others. All of her other sisters are dead. So this happens obviously way later than what we've seen before in Clone Wars.
Yep.
She's there by herself. We've seen a Dark Jedi, not a Sith, but a Dark Jedi, someone who's fallen to the dark side and has had to be defeated. And then what was a Jedi didn't fall, but like separated, disconnected herself from her own Jedi powers and reconnects a little bit towards the end of the game. And then another Rando. And we just get to see this story happen. And the story concludes with this thing that you think is going to be profound. And they're like, no, you know what? It's better for us to let this thing just go and let's go figure out our own path. Great. And I love that because it doesn't have to be any more than that. It can just end there and we can be left to the imagination. Could you do more? But yes, you could always do more. But to me, it's almost like those TV series that end and you're like, oh, that was amazing. And then they do another and they're like, oh, well, no, you didn't need to keep going with that. Just let it go. Like it could end there and be the cliffhanger where you're like, oh, I wonder what that could be. And it doesn't need to be something else. And I kind of like that for Fallen Order, that it doesn't need to be more than the story provides, because the larger events of Vader and all these other things we've talked about, they're still going. This can just be that one story you got to open up a door or a window and look in and watch it for a minute and go, cool, that was a good story. Let's just go put that aside. Other stuff is now happening.
I totally agree. I mean, it's like no one was saying, and it's like I feel like this need for perpetual sequels has really been like a part of this modern generation, because I feel like no one was like, you know what, we need Moby Dick 2. like another symbolist tome. The thing that people want is they love a great story and then they want it to continue. And I'll give a really good example. HBO's Watchmen series this year or this last year is unbelievable. It is so great. And everybody's like, oh, I hope that they come back. And yes, there is definitely a sequel that they could do to that series. And well done, Damon Lindelof. You have redeemed yourself from Prometheus. But the Watchmen series is like startlingly good, and it ends in a way where it's like opens up all of these things. What does this mean? Where can this go? And I'm not going to give any spoilers because I don't want to spoil it, because it's so great. I hope that everyone's able to experience it. But the end of that series is so amazingly good, and it's okay if it ends there. It really is. Like sometimes stories can just end and we can be left with that. And it's when we start to demand more out of it that becomes an artifice. Yeah. And so I always love it when an artist is like, no, it's over now. You could easily be like, you can even look at children's stories. Like my kids are reading Charlotte's Web. You could do, Wilbur 2. But it starts to become, unless there's a story that you want to tell, you don't need to tell it. It's very rare to me when you get that echo that can overtake that follow-up, the sequel that can really join its original story and make it worth its weight, like Empire. I like that these games are like this. That's
why I
the
like
Fallen Order is a good example.
Yeah, so I think it's why I like so many of like Neil Gaiman's books, or even like Daniel Suarez, where some of the books you could easily foresee having more, or I can want more, but I like that it just ends right there. It's like we're gonna like, and it ends in a way you're like, oh man, can you just give me like one more step? And it's like, no, that is the story. There is this story where where that author ended. This particular part of that character's story is now done. There might be a new one. So this is something, okay, I know this is not Star Wars, but I love Philip Pullman's his Dark Materials. I love, absolutely love it. And the TV series that HBO has been doing has been a stunning representation of those books compared to the original movie. Was entertaining in its own right, but it was not great. It was just an entertaining movie. This TV series has been pretty damn true to the story. Like with some tunes and tweaks, it's been pretty damn true to the story. But what I love is there's actually a follow-up series, and it started publishing 2 years ago. And the first book in that series, called La Belle Sauvage, is with Lyra as a newborn. She is in a bassinet. And and it's literally the tale of these two characters who are kids, like a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, getting Lyra when the great flood of London happens that we hear about in The Golden Compass, gets her to her father,
Yep.
and then we are left there where the baby is left at Jordan College. And then the next book, which I think I've ordered, comes out sometime this year. Lyra is like 22 years old. So it's not actually like a sequel series. It's he calls it an equal series because it's filling in some additional things that we don't know about the story, like how she got where she was, like 9-10 years before that point. And then the next book is long after the events of the Subtle Knife. The Subtle Knife is done. It's not the Subtle Knife. Sorry, the Amber Spyglass. The Amber Spyglass is over. Those events have happened. She was like, what, 14, 15 years old when that happened? Now she's in her early 20s. Like, it's long gone. It's a different thing altogether. And then there's another book that will happen where she's the main character, but it happens slightly after that, and it's a different tale altogether. And I like it because it is carrying some characters over, but telling very different stories at different points in that character's life that that have something to do with the original because we're based off of it, but isn't a continuation of that original story. That original story is a done story. It's over. It's completed. These are their own equal stories, just happening to center around a similar character. And the idea of that I really enjoy because it doesn't need to retell this or continue that story's over. Something else can now come from that point.
Yeah, I love finality in a story. I love the feeling of like catharsis, if that makes sense. I really that's what hits me in a really great story. And I'm going to bring up another children's book, but Stuart Little.
Oh yeah,
we're jumping around from his Dark Materials and HBO's The Watchmen, and now Stuart Little. But it's a great model for you can end a book in a place where the character is in a place where that story should end. And I think Stuart Little is it's almost ends kind of on a sad but hopeful note, where he's driving off. He doesn't know if he's ever going to get to where he wants to go and find his friend. But I think the last line is, but it feels like he's going in the right direction. And that's okay to end it like that. Even Star Wars, as just one movie, now of course A New Hope, but as Star Wars is one movie, is a story it's okay to end. And I like when you confront a story and you say, what's a thing that we want to tell? What's a new story we want to tell?
Yeah.
That's how you go from Ridley Scott's Alien to James Cameron Aliens. Like you can reinvent a character, almost have it exist in a very similar universe, but it's a new story that you want to tell rather than a retread or a soft reboot, where you see that soft reboot happening all the time.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like I love the risk of saying the end, not the end question mark.
No, like done.
But actually providing finality.
Yeah.
And then if you want to tell a story in that universe, like the example that you were telling, perfect. Go for it.
Yeah, a couple examples of that. One Star Wars, one not Star Wars is Neil Gaiman's The Ocean at the End of the Lane is very much that way, where the way that it ends very much feels like, to me it's like, wait, what? This is how okay. Like, and I don't mean that he doesn't provide an ending. It is an ending. The book is over. Clearly, that story has been told. But when you get to the end, what you thought would have been the ending is very clearly not the ending, because what he's actually seen, what he thinks is the ending, and he remembers, has actually re-happened to this character several times, because the characters he's interacting with as the main character are sort of like beings that are perpetual, and they have like this infinite life, and he is a normal person, he doesn't. So as he grew up and he has encountered these characters repeatedly in the same place, he doesn't remember it because they're the type of things that you're not going to remember. But then he does remember it at the time, but as soon as he leaves, it goes away again. So like it's almost like he's remembering the same story repeatedly. It's a continuous thing for them, but then it's like, and then it naturally has to end because it's another ending of this, almost of a loop. But then you are just like, and now we're going to walk away because we don't need to continue to see this loop play out for this guy. We've learned what this is. That story is now done. And I like it because it doesn't feel done, but when you think about it, it's like, no, but it is. But it is actually over. And I think Rogue One in Star Wars is another great example of that, because the way that
example.
Because it's not just one self-contained movie. Like, that's an easy thing to see. It's a single self-contained movie that's one story. That's obvious. But I think the end of that movie, when we see the plans transfer to the ship, the Alderaanian transport ship, and Leia gets it, we don't see the Star Destroyer following it yet. We don't see it being shot at yet. We see it get away. We see Vader stand there and in the airlock and close his lightsaber, and we see, what is this? And she says, it's hope, and that's it. We know that there is another story to tell, which is what became Star Wars: A New Hope later on, or just Star Wars when it was first released. Like, that is a new story that picks up where that one left off, but it's very clearly, this story of Rogue One finished here, and it was its own thing. And then, in my opinion, Star Wars: A New Hope, while it may have picked up from there, it's now telling a different story at that point. There's a through line, which is the plans went from here to here, but to me, it's like a relay race. The stretch of road that one racer had to go through, and the things that person had to deal with to hand off the baton, happened to that person. That person's story has now been complete. That racer is now done. We're not going to see that person again. This is a new tale with a single through line that continues, but the stories are different stories at that point. And I think that's why I go back to Rogue One so often, because it's like, it's its own thing, but it has a finality to it that does fit into the larger universe and tells you a lot of other things. But we don't need, we might learn about, we're not going to learn about Jen Erso really again. We're going to learn about Cassian Andor in his own series later on. Yeah. But we're not going to, Jen's gone, her character's done, and that's fine. Like, that is okay. She doesn't need to continue. There doesn't need to be another part for her to play, or anyone in that story, KSO or any of the other characters. There doesn't need to be more parts for them to play just because people want to see them around. Like, they played a really good part in that tale overall.
Yeah, and their story's done, and it's funny because I think I've got a good intersection here, which is, we started out talking about video games, we talked about sequels, and we talked about stories that build on stories, and I think I've got a good example.
Go for it.
And it's Star Wars, and it's the Dark Forces video game series. So Dark Forces started out, Kyle Katarn is your main character, and this is actually pre-Rogue One, so his job is to steal the Death Star plans, and it's kind of like Star Wars' attempt at making like a Wolfenstein or Doom style video game, where it's like a first-person shooter game, and you're having to go through all these things, then you fight
Dark Troopers, first introduction.
Yes. All these things, by the way, have been fished out for future use in other Star Wars materials. And then the second game is not, let's follow Kyle as he goes and does it again. No, now this game is Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight. And it's all about, it's got some amazing cutscenes, by the way. You could watch them all on YouTube. And it's cinematic. It's actually filmed. And it's this guy, Kyle, who's now beginning to realize he has a force sensitivity. And he learns to become a Jedi. And so you're, instead of just having like the rail gun and blaster pistols, now you have a lightsaber that you're taking from a fallen Jedi, and now you're learning the ways of the Jedi, and you have to fight a dark Jedi, and it's got all of this amazing Jedi lore in it. You've got to fight, I think, 7 dark Jedi. It's the Scott Pilgrim of video games, where you're fighting all of these dark Jedi, and then finally you either make a decision and fall to the dark side and become the new emperor, or you choose the light side and you restore the spirit of the Jedi. And then there's a third one, and it's got the problem in the naming of like the Rambo movies, where it's like First Blood Part 2 Rambo 3. This is where we're going on this. So we started with Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, and then there's Jedi Knight 2 Mysteries of the Sith.
I
And
thought you were
that
about to say
one,
Electric Boogaloo, and I was like, okay, I'm
oh no, totally
done.
right. So it's naming conventions is all nuts, but then that game is Mara Jade, and Mara
Oh,
Jade is Kyle Katarn's apprentice. And so you actually now play as, now instead of it being a first person shooter who's just a rebel to becoming a Jedi Knight, and now he's a Jedi Master, and you don't play as Kyle anymore. Now you play as Mara Jade. And
oh
these
man.
are some of my favorite old computer games. And it is a great example of exactly what you're talking about, which is have a story that is a successor story, not a retread. And it's exactly like how you're describing stories that work well if they're just set in the same universe and
Mm-hmm.
they have beginning, middles, and
Well,
ends.
and they don't, like you said, they don't have to be a sequel or even a triquel. They, because as you described, not having played the first game, Kyle Katarn is still the character there. Like whether
Yep,
you played him in the previous game or not, you still get to, okay, well, I have a character as a mentor to this new character I play, and I move on. Like if I had played the other game, that would have been added. They would have added to it and it'd been cool. But there's no requirement in that, and which I
totally.
think is really cool. I just realized we've been doing this for an hour, and it's
Yeah, we're
amazing.
like way
But
over
we
time.
probably need to like curb it, because I'm thinking like we have a whole conversation on Mara Jade and the existential drama that has created for years, and like what does
Oh,
Lucas think about that, and we've got more game stuff to talk about. So I think we call it for tonight. I think Matt stuck with us this entire time, which is awesome. Rich was here for a while
thank you so much,
too.
Matt.
Matt, thank you as always for being here, man. We really appreciate it. Um, uh, one other book that I do love talking about, but I did not put it in the shed tonight, and I fail at that. Is that will have sequels and or continue equals, and will continue as my wife's new book, Randall, the Blue Spider Goes Surfing, and that
Yes.
has a follow up coming out later this year in the fall, and then a third that will come out early next year sometime. There's a plan for 10 of them at this point, which is awesome. So
That's awesome.
yes, it's pretty cool. Oh, and he's getting his own ice cream. Noble Folk Ice Cream
Oh,
up
that's
in
awesome.
Sonoma County is going to be doing a like sneak peek. It's going to be a blueberry ice. He's a blue spider. Blueberry ice cream with cheesecake bites inside.
Oh, I think I talked over you when you said where you could go to get that. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it is a place called Noble Folk. It's in Healdsburg, so Sonoma County, right on the square. They have one in Healdsburg, I think one in Santa Rosa, and then one in Roner Park, I think, or Petaluma. I don't remember which one. But yeah, Noble Folk Ice Cream, and they're gonna be making an ice cream sometime in the nearest future for his book. So it's pretty cool. I'll have a copy of that in here someplace at some point.
Oh, right on. Good deal. And like especially now that things are starting to get back to normal and everybody's getting vaccinated, or as everybody keeps saying, double vaccinated. It's 2 shots. But it's good to get back out there. So that'll be
Yeah,
a nice little day trip up there, and yeah, that's
that'll be fun.
exciting.
Well, listen,
Book and
Ryan,
ice cream.
where can everybody find you?
Oh, everyone can find me at Ryan Rose. So if you've enjoyed us talking about video games and Star Wars, and if you're interested in knowing my favorite Star Trek: The Next Generation, episode, I am on Twitter, and I'm often talking about things like that and also technology. So happy to connect there at Ryan
Absolutely.
Rose.
Absolutely. You can find everything about the Kessel Chat on all the social medias at the Kessel Chat. And then I'm at Jeff Bultech on Twitter and Instagram and all the other places too. Thanks everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it. Matt Saunders, thank you for being here, man. As always, we appreciate it. Have a lovely night, everybody.
Hey, good night, everybody.